Hey, I want to welcome you all. So glad to have you back this year for an exciting year of refuel. My name is Pastor John. I'll be kind of leading you through what we're talking about, kind of going deeper, kind of unpacking what God has to say for us. And this first series that we're going to have this year is a series called Upside Down. And I want to ask you this question. Have you ever had a moment in your life where you kind of feel like things are flipped upside down? Here's kind of a typical kind of way I see this working out. Maybe you can relate as a student or as a person watching this. Let's say you've passed a test. You know how you feel when you pass a test. I mean, you're flying higher. Like I studied, or maybe didn't study, but by the grace of God, I made it through that test. And then all of a sudden the teacher comes up to you and says, "Come here." And they say, "Your friend was cheating off of you. That means you both fail a test." You were riding high, life was feeling really right side up, and then boom, you're upside down. Here's another one. Maybe you got a date to your first homecoming or your first prom, and you're like, yeah, I got a date, it's gonna be great, all these things, it's going on good. Then all of a sudden the next day you wake up and you feel sick. You go to the doctor and you find out you got mono, and you can't go to the prom anymore. That's a huge flipping your life upside down moment. Here's another one. Maybe you made the team. Maybe it's for a band or it's football or basketball, whatever sport or a club you're part of. You've made the team, you're part of it, and then all of a sudden you get an injury or something happens and you can no longer participate. Well, one more example of this would be you get to spend the entire weekend with your best friend. It's great. You're having an awesome time. You're having, if you're a girl, you're having that kind of girl slumber kind of party thing that you do. And all of a sudden, the next morning at school on Monday morning, you walk in and you see that your best friend is actually kissing your boyfriend. And life is turned upside down. Have you ever felt like that? You know, these things happen often in our lives. Moments where we're just kind of walking along and all of a sudden, bam, something happens, something changes, and you literally feel like your life is being flipped over and over again. This happens in small ways, in little things. This happens in medium-sized things. This happens in everyday occurrences. This happens in big ways. Things like all of a sudden you get that phone call that someone in your family has died, or you get word that your mom, she's got cancer, and you got to deal with that, and what are you going to do about it? Or your parents come in and say, "We're getting a divorce." And your life turns upside down. Things like you begin to fit into a school, and all of a sudden you get home and your mom and dad say, "We got to move away." Your dad got transferred, and you got to start all over again. And we have a choice in those moments about what we're going to do. We can choose to ignore them and just go on with life as normal. We can choose to just kind of bust through them and do our own thing. And we have another choice too. We can take a choice to sit back and say, maybe God is saying something to me through this. Maybe He's trying to get my attention. Not that God's doing these things, but maybe He's trying to speak to me through this. We're learning here at Faith and through our teaching that would be called a Kairos moment. A moment where God kind of reaches in and is speaking to you. A moment where you're walking through and it kind of intersects time and space, and you can really tell that God is truly trying to say something to you. You feel like things are going crazy, but God is speaking to you. These can be big things. These can be little things like you're sitting in your backyard and you're looking up at the clouds and you go, wow, God created all this. And He's just kind of trying to speak to you His love, His grace, His mercy. But God is always speaking to us, and He's speaking in two huge ways. He's speaking about His promises to us. We call that His covenant to us. And He's speaking to us what He's calling us to do as His people, as kingdom people. And we're going to talk about those two words, covenant and kingdom, here for the next few weeks together. But today we want to talk about, first of all, a guy named Abraham. In fact, when we meet Abraham, his name is not even Abraham, it's Abram. And this man was an idol worshiper. He was a pagan. He was not a God follower. And suddenly God calls him and says, "Abraham, come, follow me, and I'm going to make you into a great nation." And he follows him. It's amazing to think about that God moves this guy from nothing to something. When He calls him, his life gets turned upside down. He's called away from his family, his friends, his money, his wealth. He's even given a brand new name. And that's not all that happens to this guy. He gets a new name, but he also has some new things that happen to him. When God calls him, he gets a new home. His home is no longer in Ur of the Chaldeans where he came from, his family, but his home is in the desert as a wanderer. He gets a new lease on life in many ways. He becomes a dad for the first time, but not at some random moment, but at the age of over 100, he becomes a dad. His life is being turned upside down. He's even given this kind of a thing that he does called circumcision, which I don't want to get into details, kind of, deep there and in private, but he's called to do that as one of God's people. The story that you guys are going to read in a few minutes here, that a really great story, is from Genesis chapter 15, verses 1 through 20. And it's a story of when God tells Abraham that he's going to be the father of many. In fact, at the beginning of this message, you'll notice this story, he's called Abram. And at the end, he starts calling him Abraham. And here's how it goes. God takes him out into the wilderness and shows him the sky and says, look at the sky, look at the stars. Your family will be as numerous as the stars in the skies. He's making a promise to Abraham. But then he goes even further. He says, I want to make a covenant with you. So he goes, Abraham, go get some goats, get some sheep, get some cows, whatever. Cut them in half. Put one half on either side of the path. You can imagine this scene. Abraham is covered with blood. There's kind of this moment here of these animals in half. And then he causes Abraham to kind of go into a trance. And in that trance, Abraham sees God walk in between these animals that are cut in half. That's kind of a weird scene, like what's really going on here. God is in the smoke and the fire. We'll talk about that more later. God kind of always shows up in smoke and fire in the Old Testament. He does that very often. But what this really is, and what really God is saying here, is he's saying, I'm making a covenant with you, Abraham. And he's going even far to say, if I break that covenant, Abraham, may I be torn in two. May I be ripped apart, just like these animals in front of you. God's saying, I'm going to do the work of making you my people, of my great nation. I'm going to do it. I mean, we see this so often in Abraham's life, though. God says this to him, and he makes this covenant with him, and Abraham goes, no, let me do it. In fact, he goes out and says, I'm going to go have a kid with another lady, because I'm not having the kid that God promised me right away. But over and over again, God reminds Abraham of the covenant that he cut, that he made with Abraham. God's promise to Abraham of what he would do, that he would make him a great nation, and that his people would be God's people. And God made the same covenant with you. And it doesn't take us very far to think of someone else that was torn from limb to limb. Our Lord Jesus Christ was put on a cross. His arms were stretched open wide. Blood was shed for you, for me, so that we could be the people of God. And as people of God, we are loved. We are cared for. We don't have to worry about fears and our sin. In fact, God says, I take that away through my son's death on the cross. You don't have to be afraid of even death, because I've taken that away, because my son, Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, has died, defeated sin, defeated death, defeated Satan, and rose from the dead. And now you are my children, and I am your God. I am your daddy in many ways. That's the covenant that God forms with us. And so we're left with this. When we hear that, when we look at our lives, when we look at this promise that God has made with us, how do we live that out? If God is truly saying to you today, you are my child, you are my beloved, I have chosen you, I'm willing to die for you, I'm going to do all the work, where does that leave us? You know, I don't have all the answers, but that's a great question to maybe start off in your groups with today, is if we hear God saying this to us, What do we got to do with it? How can we wrestle with it? What are we going to do about it? If we believe that God has made a covenant with us, what does it mean for us to live it out as his people, as his kingdom? Great things to wrestle with today in your group, and I pray that God blesses that. And next week we'll be back. We're going to be talking about Joseph, another Old Testament guy, and what God has done in his life and turned his life upside down, and how we can apply that to our lives. Have a blessed time. I'm praying for you, and we'll see you next time.